Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm Edgar Wiggins, your host for this program that is dedicated to providing you with practical and useful information regarding mental health and related issues. Suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, with a suicide occurring on average every 11.7 minutes. However, there is a suicide attempt every 28 seconds. Here to talk about this important issue with us today is Melissa Peltzman, who is a suicide attempt survivor. Welcome to Mental Health Matters, Melissa.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about your history regarding suicide attempts, what was involved, and where you were at emotionally during those periods?
Certainly. I believe my first serious attempt was when I was 20. I've been dealing with mental health issues since I was very young. Been probably on lots of medications since I was 14. The first attempt was shortly after a fight with my mother. However, in retrospect, that was just the catalyst. It was a long time coming in terms of my suicidality, my feeling as though I did not want to live. I was just kind of waiting for the straw that broke the camel's back. I basically took all of my medications, every pill I had, and I was living at home at the time, so eventually my mother came to ask me something, and she could tell I just was not right. The medications were kicking in. I was extremely groggy to the point where I couldn't really walk. I was crawling. And she called an ambulance, and I guess from what I remember, I was in and out, but they had me drink a lot of charcoal.
Sure.
And probably felt like I slept for eons, and woke up in the hospital.
When you woke up in the hospital, what were some of the first thoughts that went through your mind?
I think at the time I was just so heavily drugged that I couldn't formulate much cohesive thought. I remember bits and pieces of it. I remember very odd things from odd interactions from there. But essentially, when I was put on the psychiatric unit, first thought was, get me out of here. It was not the first time I had been on a unit. However, I'm not a very good patient and never have been, and have a difficult time when my freedom is taken away from me. With regards to, was I upset that I was still alive? I don't think so. I don't think you don't. I didn't think in the that kind of moment when you are that depressed, your mind doesn't think rational thoughts, nor when you get that upset. I mean, even now when I get very upset, I need a few minutes to calm down before I'm thinking perfectly rationally. And at the time, death seemed like the only escape, and because life just felt completely intolerable. However, I have no regrets now that I was not successful, and I don't think I really had any regrets then. I truly think that had I wanted it 110% wholeheartedly, I would have been successful. If not on that attempt, then on a future one.
So I want to be sure that I'm understanding you clearly. So part of what I think I'm hearing is that your attempt, that there was a level of ambivalence, if you will, in your attempt. It wasn't so much, part of you wanted to die, but there was also a part of you that wanted to live. Am I hearing that correctly?
I believe so.
Okay.
In a subsequent attempt a few years later, after I again overdosed, I couldn't not say goodbye to the people I loved, and I left a voicemail on my therapist's machine thinking that she'd be in session, so she wouldn't get it until after I was successful. And I sent my mother a text message. And had I not done that, not done either of those, yes, I would have been successful. But I think in hindsight, I think I had to have been ambivalent. Because I believe I certainly could have been successful had I not had that ambivalence.
Well, it's also, I've worked with people over the years, and what some people have told me is that their suicide attempt was in fact a cry for help. It wasn't that they weren't serious, it wasn't that they weren't intentional, but in fact there was a part of them that was reaching out for help. And here, in your case, you sent a text message to your mother and you left a voicemail for the therapist that was working with you, which both of those things in my mind have the quality, perhaps, of a cry for help. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. However, in that moment, I'm not thinking, here, I'm going to send somebody a message hoping they save me.
Right, exactly.
It was more...
You wanting to say goodbye.
Yeah, life just... First of all, as I mentioned, when I was that deep in my depression, I was not rational. And life, each time there was an event that happened that it was almost like I was waiting for something to happen to give me an excuse. But
So let's talk about what happens or what has happened to you when you get overwhelmed with your emotions, if that's the proper term to use. Let's talk about how you're feeling, what your thinking is like when you get into that kind of crisis state.
are you talking about referring to me today or me?
Pre-suicide attempt.
Okay. Wow.
Okay.
All I can say was I couldn't see it at the time, but I was an absolute mess.
Okay.
I wasn't functioning. I wasn't living. I've also, in addition to major depressive disorder, excuse me, have dealt with anorexia since I was 12 years old.
Okay.
So not only was I physically, and at the time I was in, again, I couldn't see it, but I was in very bad physical shape. So not only was my brain quite literally being starved, but I was just numb. And yet at the same time, I felt like I felt everything. I think a lot of the behaviors I acted on almost were to make the overwhelming feelings go away. I kind of just talked kind of circuitously,
well, no,
but
that's actually, in my opinion, very articulate. Are you aware, or were you aware at the time, or are you aware now, looking back on it, about the interplay between the major depression and the eating disorder?
oh, absolutely. Yes, I'm very well aware of it, and I know that all of the mental health issues I have, I mean, I'm very aware as to approximately what they date back to. It's more of a matter of I've never been able to, quote unquote, go there in terms of therapy. And at the time, no therapist wanted to push me because I was in such, so unstable.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna pause here while we take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Awkward. Do I look familiar? I should. You might remember me from here. Here. Or maybe even here.
But an awkward silence can be a great thing.
It can actually be a perfect moment to reach out to a friend and ask if they're okay if they seem down.
It doesn't matter how you say it.
You all right?
Everything's okay?
All G?
You all right, girl?
You cool?
You bugging dog.
Just show you're there for them.
Go on, Kelly. Seize the awkward.
Hey, you haven't really been yourself lately. Are you okay?
Find out how you can help a friend with their mental health at seizetheawkward.org.
Every year, millions of Americans are exposed to a contagious virus.
It's not a disease.
But it's toxic.
It's not genetic.
But we're all at risk. You can contract it from a stranger or a friend.
You can catch it at the movies
Or by listening to a song.
And if you spend even a minute on the internet,
You've definitely been exposed.
What is this virus? It's stigma.
Stigma.
It's stigma.
stigma may not directly affect you.
But it harms the 1 in 5 Americans living with mental health conditions.
Stigma promotes an environment of shame,
Fear and silence.
which prevents millions of people from seeking help.
Stigma isn't just harmful. You also risk coming across as a real jerk.
But there's good news.
The National Alliance on Mental Illness believes stigma towards mental illness is 100% curable.
And it's pretty easy to find out if you have it.
So do yourself and everyone a favor.
Go to curestigma.org and get tested for stigma.
Welcome back to Mental Health Matters. We're talking today with Melissa, who is sharing her experiences living with depression and eating disorder and suicide attempts. So we were really kind of, before the break, talking about some of the things that were, for want of a better term, precipitants or catalysts that kind of pushed you in the direction of getting overwhelmed with your emotions and your thinking, and how today you've moved in, or at least more recently, you've moved in a direction of getting more of a handle on that. So can you talk about that, how it used to be and how it is now?
Sure. Honestly, I believe my issues with depression probably date back to childhood. However, we're going back 30 years, and people weren't very aware of childhood depression. I was thought of as overly sensitive, as a crybaby, a lot of things. And what I've always known since I was younger, very young, was that the thoughts that go through my head when I get upset are very extreme. Even as a child, learned it's called catastrophizing.
Sure.
But the thoughts, when I would get very upset about something, my thoughts would race ahead that if this happened, it's going to cause this, which will lead to this, which will lead to this. And I remember at 12 years old thinking that my parents will forever be ashamed of me because I will not be a successful adult. But anyway, I guess my thoughts still tend to do that. When I get very upset, they become very extreme, very all or nothing. But I think the difference now is that it is much easier for me to calm down, and a much quicker process for me to calm down.
Sure.
And I also know that if, as much as in the moment, if I feel like I don't want to deal with this or live through, I want to shut these thoughts off forever, often within a few minutes, they dissipate, and I can often do things that will, I can definitely do healthy things, such as artwork is huge for me, and even expressing my thoughts and even at this point suicidal thoughts if I ever have them. They're more ideations at this point.
So the difference is that somewhere along the line, and I assume, because we talked a little bit about treatment, that you've learned through treatment that you are able to manage the thoughts so that while they may be upsetting, they don't become overwhelming to the point where you act out in a negative way. I mean, the other thing that you said that I think is really important is, and it's an important distinction for people to make, you know, it's one thing to have suicidal thoughts, it's something else to have suicidal actions. So expressing suicidal thoughts, apparently you've learned that doing that doesn't necessarily lead to suicidal actions.
No, it's actually, I've found, like I said, artwork is huge for me. I've found it to be a healthy way of getting out my thoughts without having to act on them. And once I get engrossed in a piece of artwork, everything, it all goes away, and I'm calm, and I am still able to express how I feel, but in a healthy way. I won't say that I'm always successful in expressing myself healthfully. I do still act impulsively at times, but I do self-mutilate and have been since I was very young. But when I do, the times are few and far between. I might even go year, two without doing anything, and it's just.
So I'm going to ask an question that seems even to me a bit ridiculous, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Probably isn't.
Because it's my show. So what do you think is if you had to focus on a single thing that helps you manage your illness, what might that be? Now I know that's kind of, but
being able to express myself without judgment, be it through artwork or writing or speaking to somebody, frankly. There are a number of people I know who I wish I could go to for support, and that mean well, but I can't, because if I were to express myself frankly, it would be very difficult for them to hear.
So it would result in conflict.
Inevitably, not purposefully, but you learn after a while that you can't change other people's reactions to things.
And who you can share with and who you can't, and how you can do
Exactly.
that. Okay, so my other question is, how has treatment benefited you?
Well, this also goes back to the previous question, but I have an amazing therapist who I've been seeing for about 13 years now.
Okay.
And I know that I if I needed to, I could text her or call her night or day. And especially if I were in crisis. And
Okay.
she would get back to me and be able to essentially talk me through it. Now, that's not something I would like to do, because the last thing I want to do is bother somebody when they're off duty.
Sure.
But when I've needed it the most, she's always been there for me. And as I mentioned, without judgment.
And sometimes it can be really supportive and reassuring to know that somebody's there if you need them, whether you need to reach out for that kind of urgent help or not. Just the fact that they're there can be reassuring. Okay.
And I actually have, even when I haven't been suicidal, but for instance, if I had maybe sent my therapist a text message that could she call me, and obviously didn't get it, then I've called crisis centers before, just to talk to them, and you know, friends play a great role too.
So basically what I'm hearing you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that in addition to your therapist, that you've also made use of other supports that are out there, be it a crisis line, be it some friends and people that understand you, so you feel like there's a safety net of support when you need it.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's also really helpful is, besides my, I guess, regular talk therapist, I see psychiatrists regularly who specializes in my illnesses and has a very good understanding of.
Okay, so that's important, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because, you know, a lot of us believe that the most effective therapy is a combination of talk therapy along with medication or psychopharmacology or whatever, so that really helps with those things that are in fact part of chemical imbalances and those things. So, you know, that also becomes important. So it sounds like you've got a good support system.
I am definitely a proponent for medication if it works for you. It has, in many ways, saved my life. Believe when I was younger, and on numerous occasions, I convinced myself that everything's fine, I could deal with this, and I don't need to deal with the medications, because there are quite a number of them. And every time I've gone off them, inevitably, a huge crash comes.
Right, and that's the proof in the pudding that you don't do as well. I hate to stop this conversation, because I really am enjoying it tremendously, and I think that your message is really an important one in terms of support, recovery, and treatment. And so I want to thank you for coming on today. It's really been enlightening, and sharing your story with me and with our viewers. And I want to remind our viewing audience that if you or someone you know needs help with a mental health crisis, you can call Baltimore Crisis Response at 410-433-5175. That number can be called 24 hours a day. And remember, your mental health matters to us. Thank you.